In late August, possibly early September of 1972, Rita and I became engaged to be married. I had graduated from Bible college in the June, and then most of my summer had been spent in doing evangelistic missioning in Dublin and then speaking at young people's summer camps. And when I got back to Rita's home in Bournemouth after the final camp of the year, very quickly we decided to become engaged, and we went and bought the engagement ring. On the last day of September 1972, we went together to the New Forest for a picnic and a day out in the forest. All the ingredients necessary to make that a really happy occasion were there. For a start, we were young, we were in love, and we were together. And the forest was beautiful, as it was early autumn, the weather was good, and the food was good. All the ingredients for a good time were there. But over us, there was something of a cloud, because we both knew that the next day I would be saying goodbye, and I would be going to Birmingham, getting on a train, going up to Birmingham to begin, well, what initially was thought to be 1 year of service with the Birmingham City Mission, and eventually became 5 years. And whilst Birmingham from Bournemouth was no really great distance, about 150 miles by road, a couple of hours or so by train in those days, nonetheless, we weren't looking forward to the separation. We wanted to be together. And this was before mobile phones, and it wasn't that easy to connect with each other across the miles. And there wouldn't be much opportunity or money available or a vehicle available to make it possible for me to go up and down from Birmingham to Bournemouth very often. So no matter how lovely the day was, over us there was that shadow of an imminent parting. Now, if I could magnify the way we felt concerning our parting on that day by 1,000,000 times, I suspect it would still fall short of that sense of foreboding which hung over the disciples on the occasion of the Last Supper. Jesus had broken the news to them of his imminent departure. He told them the details of how it was going to happen, although not sure even then it had really sunk in. And I suspect that the awareness that he would soon be leaving them was intruding into their enjoyment of their Passover meal and their time together. They had eaten the Passover meal together in an upper room which had been duly prepared. They were familiar, of course, with the practice and with the procedure of the Passover meal, but at the end of the meal, Jesus did something new. He took bread and he took wine, possibly food and drink, which were the remnants of the meal they had enjoyed, but he took bread and he took wine and he used them as a visual aid to show them and to teach them what was about to happen to him and why it had to happen and what the significance and the consequences of it would be. He instituted the Lord's Supper, sometimes called communion, Eucharist, breaking bread, Last Supper, whatever, all talking really about the same thing, the taking of bread and wine in remembrance of the body and the blood of Christ, which was given and shed for us. In many churches, I can't help but feel that we've become a little precious about this particular thing. Everything we feel has to be done in a decorous and precise way. Indeed, pre-COVID, in many churches that I've been in, if you watch as a plate with the bread on it is passed up and down the rows for people to take a piece for themselves, if you were a visitor, you might think there was a competition going on you'd not been told about. Competition to see who could get the smallest piece off the loaf. Well, I'm not criticising that. It's a matter of personal decision and preference. But the breaking of bread on that night, when Jesus was with his disciples in the upper room, I think it was a visceral thing. It was a raw thing. Raw emotions and terrible significance. Let me see if I can illustrate that for you. Because I think in essence, this is what was happening. Jesus took a piece of bread. And this was a message saying, look, See how my hand seize this bread. See how they bite into it and bruise it and tear it. In a little while, people are going to treat my body the way I've just treated this bread. And I'm going to allow it to happen for your sakes. And then Jesus took wine and he poured it and it ran rich and free. And Jesus said, in a little while, my blood is going to flow like that. You see, when my body is broken, when your body is broken, we bleed. Same was true for Jesus. When the nails and the lash and the thorns and the spear, when these things pierced him, he bled. His blood was shed for our sakes. The Bible tells us in Luke's Gospel that immediately after Jesus had done this, in the context of him talking about giving his life, laying it down for his friends, a very unseemly conversation broke out among the disciples. Their conversation, the subject they were discussing, would have been inappropriate almost at any time, but in the context of the Last Supper, it was almost unbelievably crass. This was an occasion when Jesus had demonstrated servant attitude, servanthood, by washing his disciples' feet. This was the time when he spoke about how he was going to serve them by giving his body to be bruised and broken and his blood to be shed. And in the context of Jesus talking about service, the disciples, we read, were having a dispute as to which of them would be the greatest. Their concern was not about service, it was about status. Now, I said that was almost unbelievably crass, but the truth is, and the sad truth is, it's not difficult to believe, is it? If we know our own hearts, it's not actually all that difficult to believe. Martin Luther said that he had thoughts at the communion which would shame the devil. Does that resonate with you at all? Our hearts are, even regenerate hearts, we're capable of some awful stuff, aren't we? And the disciples have this unseemly conversation about status. And so Jesus responds to them in Luke's Gospel. And he says this, look, you know how it is in the world. People in authority lord it over other people. And yet they insist on being called benefactors, even though they are in reality tyrants. The person at the top bosses around their subordinates, and the subordinates in their turn pass that on to the people who are subordinate to them. And Jesus says that's how it is in the world. It's not how it is to be in my church. No, thank you. No bullying in my church. No throwing your weight around in my church. No oppressing people in my church. That's not part of my kingdom. I am the king, says Jesus, and I have served you. And you, regardless of your rank or your role in my family, in my church, you are to serve other people. That is what Jesus taught. Now, take leaders for a moment. It is true, actually, that leaders serve primarily by leading. That is their gift, that is their calling, and as they lead, so they serve. But there is still to be no bullying, no lording it over other people. Well, when the simple communion was over, they sang together, and then Jesus led his disciples, his friends, I suspect from the upper room and through the darkened streets of the old city, possibly past the pool of Bethsaida, a scene of a notable miracle some time before, and out through the gate, maybe the gate of the Essenes, which some scholars have identified as possibly being the eye of the Needle Gate. And then he led them about a half-mile walk beyond the city walls, across the brook of Kidron, and into an olive grove called Gethsemane. Tomorrow we're going to conclude our thinking on what past hymn writers have been pleased to call Mount Calvary, but which is also known rather more starkly by an altogether more ugly name, Golgotha. So we've traced not all by any means, but some of the encounters that Jesus had with people from that time when he first sat on or astride that young, previously unridden donkey, right up now to the point where he's broken bread with his disciples in the upper room. And tomorrow we will make our way to Golgotha and we will marvel. Thank you for your fellowship today.